Welcome to the Land Investing Business Secret Podcast, where each short episode we talk about the strategies, experiences, and the tools to help you launch, grow, and scale your land business. Learn how to find freedom within your own business, find out ways to build consistency in your processes, and hear how other everyday land investors are winning so you can get to the next step closer to building your dream life through your land business. And I'm your host of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast by Pebble, Jesse Kwong. Hey, how's it going? It's Jesse here from the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast. I've got a special guest here, Dave Denniston. He is somebody I've known for a while. I've heard about him. I've seen him around before, and it's great to finally have him on. We have a lot of mutual friends, and one of the things I love about Dave is his willingness to try different things. As founders, as entrepreneurs, as solopreneurs, right? We're all looking to find something that we can build so that we can find freedom, so we can continue to grow and try different things. And this is exactly what this interview is about with Dave. Not only that, he does share some of the technical things he does as well, and even some terms I've never heard of, and I got him to explain on this show. Anyways, enjoy this episode here as he talks about his businesses and how he scaled up everything. Cheers. All right, how's it going? It is Jesse here from the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast. I've got a guest here, Dave Denniston. Dave, how are you doing?
Good, Jesse. Glad to be here, man.
I got a little nervous about pronouncing your last name, but I did it correctly? All right. I was just explaining to Dave, I was like, Dave, I remember your name. I do. I genuinely do. And then I don't know too much about you other than you've been brought up, amongst our mutual friends. And please don't take that the wrong way. But I'm so interested to know about you and what you're doing. And, I have you guys submit a form to kind of come in here and talk. And I do a little dig in here. And I'm really interested to hear what's going on in your life and all of that. So, Dave, first of all, welcome to the show. And I'd love to ask you, who are you? Tell us a little bit about you, Dave. We're going to learn about you on this show here.
I like to think of myself as just a regular guy. I'm not some big guru or someone that has a course and coaching program and, all that kind of stuff. So I like to put myself in that camp. With it, but basically, long story short, I'm someone who definitely explores quite a bit. So I've been in financial planning for 20 plus years, which has been my thing forever. And then on top of that, I got into all kinds of things, from a mobile gaming kit to Amazon FBA to finally getting into land back 6 years ago. A little more than that is when I bought the course from Land Geek Podolsky and got into some tax liens and lately into some deal funding type stuff. And awesome. So here we are.
I just got you to sum up like the last 6-10 years in a couple minutes. I appreciate that for especially for our listeners. And yeah, it's always great to connect with people. I know that you're not a coach, you're not in the guru space, but I think you are a name that people have heard about. And I know, again, you've been on other friends' podcasts as well. So it's great to see that. You do a lot of things. I do know that you are also on the is it a financial advisor? Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you're juggling. I mean, you've done some exploring. You mentioned you also got into Amazon FBA, and now here you're in land. Why did you do that? I mean, you've got something great going on for you in the financial world, and clearly, I think you're quite involved in that area as well. And so, what sort of led you on to explore?
Yeah. So the short version of the story is, listen, we take you back in a time. I graduated from college in 2003. So that's literally when I got into financial planning and kind of started my own business, kind of failed at it, and then joined someone else's firm. And I had been blessed to receive some inheritance. during that time. And so we had our house paid off. We had no car loans, no student loans. It wasn't like millions of dollars, but it was like 300K, which is really substantial for a
Yeah.
24-year-old, 25-year-old at the time. And so, as I was staff for another financial advisor after failing and kind of making it my own, I made this huge leap of faith of taking everything that I had and literally buying financial planning clients. And so my wife and I moved August 1st, 2008 from Seattle out here to Minnesota, where we've now been for 15 plus years. And it was awesome timing because Lehman Brothers goes bankrupt, AIG goes bankrupt, and it was literally a $3 million acquisition. And I had, on top of now, I was having loans due to the guy I was buying stuff from. I also had family loans because I didn't have enough money to put $1 million
Sure.
down on the business. And so here I was going from no debt to being in my eyeballs in debt and literally just trying to, in the worst financial crisis in our lifetime, and trying to keep my head above water. And things worked out slowly over time. But I had envisioned myself when I did the acquisition of, hey, I'm going to do some really cool stuff and make this wise decision and be a multimillionaire, right? And I'll pay off my parents quick. And turned out that wasn't the case. And so I was doing well for myself. We were making 150, $200,000 a year, which is amazing, by any stretch of the imagination. But
Yeah.
I wasn't able to make a lot of progress on getting to our goals, right? Because now I'm literally saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And that ended up leading me to exploring different income streams. I have my own podcast that's financial planning for doctors, basically called the Freedom Formula for Physicians, which was the very first kind of thing I started. I wrote a few books around doctors and money. And that was great. It wasn't really generating revenue, right? It's like you sell a
Mm.
book, you make a few bucks. And I was able to help people, which is also awesome and a
Yeah.
benefit to doing that. It's like this
Mm.
podcast for you, right? You don't make any money on the podcast. It's on helping people with Pebble and websites and all those other kinds of cool things that you
Sure.
do.
Yeah.
And so in the financial planning world, it's so flippin' competitive. There's here in my office building, there's 7 floors. There's probably a financial advisor every other floor, right? And so we're everywhere. It's like Starbucks, and there's another financial advisor over there. There's another financial advisor over there. Very, very competitive. As I grew to kind of know who I am, I realized, I kind of suck at being a sales guy. I can do it, but I'm not some Uber rainmaker dude that's gonna pull in, millions and millions of dollars of assets. I love people. I take good care of them when I have them, but getting clients was hard. And so I started exploring these other avenues. So I got into the Amazon FBA business. Pat Flynn, if anyone's listened to Pat Flynn, he was a huge inspiration for me beyond doing the podcasts and the books and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, let me try some stuff and just see kind of what sticks. And so I tried the Amazon FBA thing. I got
Yeah.
my daughter involved a little bit, and she didn't
Wow.
really like it. And we were going to like Target and Walmart and trying to find things on sale, put it on
Yeah.
Amazon, and then realized like how much the fees suck it up. It looked fine, arbitrage, buy something for $30, sell it for 60. But when you add in the fees, it just like financially you were working for, $5 or $10 an hour, which didn't even cover the gas. And so then I made another acquisition with a cousin, in this case, of a company that was called City Building Kit, and essentially was an existing business. And there was revenue, which was great. But the problem with software, as I'm sure you can relate to, right? It's constantly changing. This was built on a
Yeah.
platform called Unity, and Unity
Yeah.
was putting out new versions all of the time and keeping up with those changes on top of making iterations of the kit. I'm not a software guy like you and your partner, and it wasn't lucrative enough to really get my attention. So the company just slowly faded over time to where just this last December we finally shut it
Oh,
down.
wow.
And
Okay.
then that was like 2015 or so when I
Mm.
did that. So it was like 8 years ago when we made that acquisition. And I think at the end of the day we kind of broke even, maybe lost a little bit of money. So it wasn't like some huge money losing
Mm.
venture. But then Podolsky came onto my podcast in
Hmm.
2017. And so having the podcast, while it didn't make me money, it led me to land, which has had many, many, many times returns. So I'm so grateful to have started that journey 6 years ago, and the time that I did, which my how times have changed in the last
Yeah.
6 years. But it's been a great journey, and here we are.
I appreciate you sharing that journey with us. I can relate to a lot of things you said, especially when you mentioned Pat Flynn. He is probably my first inspiration on going off on my own. So it was very exciting times to say the least. Smart Passive Income. I don't even know if that podcast, I'm assuming it's still around. I haven't heard it in a long time, but it's interesting to hear how many people one person can have an impact on it, and it's great to be able to finally several years later get to meet other people who have been touched by familiar or similar faces.
Well,
um,
you talk about a full circle moment. So I was in a mastermind with a guy named Pat Flynn. This Pat Flynn though does kettlebells, and he does really well for himself, but
yeah.
he wasn't the Pat Flynn that was on the rise in like 2014, 2015.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and the Smart Passive Income podcast,
yeah,
Pat Flynn,
yeah.
he came to Minneapolis for the Lead Pages convention, which I'm here in
Oh yeah.
Minneapolis, and so I came and I met that Pat Flynn, and then I said, you should meet the other Pat Flynn. And turns out, I think it was last year or the year before, he had the other Pat Flynn on the podcast. I'm like, I've met both
No
those
way.
guys. I
Oh
know both Pat Flynn.
wow.
So that was pretty awesome.
That is hilarious. Holy smokes. Anyways, that's it's also really interesting. You dabbled in Amazon FBA, and a lot of people who get into land, I'm sure, have also touched Amazon FBA. I've heard it countless times. And as a quick summary, I mean, how long were you doing that for? And was it sort of, you realized pretty quickly you needed to get out of it?
Yeah, it was like 3 months, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
we sent some stuff to a warehouse, and Amazon was starting, and I sold some stuff, which was great.
Yeah.
So we made a little bit of money off it. Then other stuff was there, and Amazon kept charging fees, right? So they just send it back to me and we like donate it to Goodwill or something. So my wife
Gotcha.
was like, "Why are you keeping this stuff around the house?" I was like, "Okay, fine, I'll just get rid of it." And so we did.
uh the journeys. And so coming back to you now, and during the whole time you are running your own sort of, you're involved with financial advising. And how do you find balance with that? I mean, I don't know what your hours look. What does your typical day look like for somebody who's running something that gives you, I'm assuming, steady income? Now your land is probably, I don't know if it does eclipse your financial business, but
Yeah.
how does that day sort of look like for you?
Well, let's talk about the journey a little bit. Initially, of course, land, as I got into it in late 2017, was at the time it was relatively easier to buy and harder to sell. And
Yes. Yep.
so I started, as many people did, in Costilla County, and kind of proved the model, and
Yeah.
got it going, right. And so then I just went bat wild crazy. And one of the things I don't think I've talked about a whole lot was, because of that huge acquisition I made, I had enormous tax write offs. So I had literally
Ah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars of carry forward um, business operating losses. And so that allowed me to not have to pay any taxes on my land income for the first few years.
That's
And
nice.
and so well, I mean, it's nice, that happened, but it sucked in that
Sure, sure.
I
Yes, yes.
lost a lot of money technically for a while.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and so that allowed me to reinvest a lot back into the business and really build
Mm.
up the entity. And with doing financial planning, I was probably doing that initially, 30 hours a week, 35
Okay.
hours a week.
Yeah.
And the land business grew. Within the first couple of years, I was doing 100 deals in a year of buying and selling. And then I
Wow.
went buck wild crazy and started doing hundreds of deals, kind of the Mark Podolsky cheap terms stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I because at the very beginning, I never wanted to give up financial planning. because I literally have now decades invested with many of my clients, and
Right.
I'm seeing some of them through now to retirement, and some of them are near
Wow.
retirement. Some have passed away in the time I've been doing this business, and I'm working with their kids. And so I don't want to give up literally decades of work. Plus, I can set my own schedule, right? It's not like there's a boss telling me, hey, at 9 a.m., you have to be at your desk and you have to get this project done. So I have the benefit of essentially having a W 2 like thing, but without the schedule
Right.
requirements.
Yes.
And so initially, in those first 2, 3 years, I mean, I was working like a madman, probably 60, 70 hours a week. And part of it was just passion of this is fun to me because like you look at financial planning, you put an ad out there, you get a fraction of a response. You go at the time, put something on Facebook Marketplace, and I was getting hundreds of messages,
Hmm.
overwhelming amount of messages and
Hmm.
interest in land. And so it was a refreshing, energizing, wonderful change from the way things had been for me. And so some dudes, they love to golf. Some dudes like to go and spend hours watching football or, college basketball or whatever. I can enjoy those things, but having that energy in the business what became a hobby for me as well as kind of a business. So I was working on it all hours if I had a spare moment. I have a family now. I have an 18-year-old daughter, I have an
Wow.
11-year-old daughter, so they were growing up as I was doing this. And so if they were doing homework or playing with friends, every chance I got, they're watching TV, I'm on the computer working away. But in
Yeah.
the meantime, I really started hiring people, right? Because I only have so much time. And I truly believed and still believe scaling is important. And so as I started having stuff I hated doing, like putting stuff on Craigslist, like dealing with over time, as wonderful as was having this problem, people responding to me on Facebook, I needed help with selling properties and responding to people. I needed help with someone doing due diligence and intake because when you're doing a couple deals a month, it's not that bad. But when you're doing 10, 15, 20, 30, you can't do it all. It's just
Yeah.
there's not enough time in the day. Plus, I'm still doing financial planning. I'm still meeting with clients. I'm still trying to grow that business as well. So I was very
Yeah.
intentional about constantly figuring out, okay, what do I want to pass on next? And
Mm.
literally every month, every quarter, every year, figuring out what's the next thing, what's the next thing, what's the next thing, so that I can move more and more and more away from being the operator and being the business owner.
Do you mean what is the next thing, as in what's the next thing to pass over to somebody else?
Yeah, just for example,
Yeah.
the very last thing that I did was I hired a fractional CFO, another land
Yes.
investor, Steve
Mm.
Hokinson, who
Mm.
is taking over some of the duties of paying people and looking over all the bookkeeping. I understand the bookkeeping. I even kind of sort of like it to a degree, but when you have, like in my case, I have 450 about terms contracts. Like it's pretty much a part-time job in itself, just
Right.
keeping track of the books and making sure things are being done right, and I don't want to make the time to do that. So
Sure. Sure. So coming back to that, and thanks for sort of sharing that with us. What it looked like, sort of getting that all lined up and then and scaled up. Really, I mean, bringing in people and pulling yourself out of that operational seat, and that's something we lean heavily into as well. But um, what does your day look like now? What does that
yeah,
look like, Dave?
so every day is different, of course, but
Sure. Yeah.
generally, let's say during a week, I'm probably having 1 to 2 to 3 financial planning client meetings on a daily basis. Some days
Yeah.
there'll be 4 or 5, other days there'll be none.
Sure.
I'm usually meeting with an employee for 1 hour a day. I have, between the two businesses, 6 direct reports.
Yeah.
And they're managing other employees and
Hmm.
assigning things and whatnot. So, and as a matter of fact, I actually have 3 land flipping businesses, but
Oh
that's a
my
story
gosh.
for another day, or we could dive into that.
Sure. Sure.
And so, I really wanted to um, get the people to manage other people, so we had layers of management in it.
Right.
So so that's a big chunk of my calendar is meetings with clients, meetings with employees. Um, I'm responding a lot to
Mm.
messages, so I get tons of messages on Facebook and Basecamp and
Mm.
email, with people just needing this and that and needing clarification on this and that, or there's this problem and that problem, whether financial planning or land, or ultimately I'm still giving approval, for example, on the final
Mm.
call for buying properties over like 5, 6, 7, 8 thousand bucks. So I'm
Gotcha.
still putting my stamp of approval on those things. So I'm responding to those kind of emails. I have my hand in hiring, but I'm not the primary person doing it. So if it's like a domestic person, I want to interview them because we're investing
Yeah.
that much more into the process. And I still want a hand in training that person just to kind of
Right.
get a feel for who are they, what are they like, stuff like that. I spend a lot of time on county research and that aspect of the land business at times, but that's not like a daily activity. That's
Mm.
once a quarter or once every 6 months, but it's concentrated time that
Yeah.
nobody else currently has the ability to do. I'll be exploring new things. Right here before we're talking, I was getting into Chat GPT and testing out
Yeah.
this and that to kind of see what it could do, and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff that
Sure.
can help the business, but takes some time, maybe some higher level thinking, or frankly
Yep.
just something I enjoy. Financial planning wise, I'm placing a lot of trades for clients, I'm managing models, I'm
Mm.
into financial plans, um, those kinds of things. I get a lot of emails from clients say, what do you think about this and that? Just stuff like those things that
Got
happen
you.
that people want my advice on.
Of course. And so on the land side of things, you've got people in place. What are those what are those roles that you've got in place?
So right this moment, I have about 15 to 20 people on the team, and so just looking from the top down, I'm kind of the CEO of the
Mhm.
company. So I'm still
You
in the
are the
CEO.
CEO.
I'm the CEO. I actually want to get myself out of that role
Got you.
here in the
Mm.
next couple of years. So if anyone is listening to this and you're kind of tired of running your own land business, but you're a great visionary, give me a ring. I'm interested in starting to interview people, but I'm in no hurry.
There you
So,
go.
um, but then below me, I mentioned I have a fractional CFO now, so he's one of the people on the team, probably working 15, 20 hours a month because I'm paying him a lot of money for that time, so I don't want him working 40 hours a week. I have a COO who started out with me first as an intake manager, and now essentially she's managing the other intake managers as well as still doing some intake herself, as well as she's managing the international virtual assistants. So her name's Summer. Also beneath me, I would say that's kind of on the same level with Summer. I have a gal that does full-time sales, and she actually does
Okay.
it for all three of the land businesses at this
Oh
point. Her
wow.
name's Christy. So she and I are doing a lot of talking. She's, for example, helping me take over YouTube and dealing with
Mm.
YouTube stuff. So if you look on our Generation Family Properties YouTube channel, you'll see Christy because she's the one talking to clients.
Ah.
I'm not. So she does that. So those are kind of in the land business, some of my direct people, and they're all, well, not the CFO, but those other two, they are full time employees. Where they're getting paid, probably if you add
Mm.
it all up, 60K plus a year,
Gotcha.
with potential for even more. So my sales
Gotcha.
gal gets paid very, very, very well for what she does because it's so important to the lifeblood of
Yes.
the business. Um,
Yes. Yes.
and then currently, I have, including my COO, I have in my primary land business, I have 4 intake managers now,
Wow.
all domestic. Underneath them, I have 5 or 6 international VAs, and we're actually expanding that team because we're getting into access scrubbing, manual going
Mm.
property by property by property in order to figure out, does it have what we think is legal access, physical access, how much is
Okay.
wetlands, stuff like that. And then we have a guy that purely does bookkeeping which is an international VA as well. So I'll have some interaction with him, but I'm trying to put my CFO be in charge of him. So that way
Right.
I'm not having to deal with it as much. Um, so that there's the bookkeeping side. I have one of my international VAs does a lot of entry into payments and stuff, and my COO also manages my notes. So as people are late on payments or if they might be defaulting, she's helping to manage that whole process as well too. As you can imagine, incredibly important job when you have 400 plus notes
Yes.
in my
Yes.
particular case. So that's most of the team.
Sure.
I have
Sure.
a data scraping guy we work with all the time.
Okay.
Website guy that we work with a lot on a lot of different projects. He's doing a big overhaul right now as we
Yeah.
speak. We have another
Awesome.
guy. We've created Pebble. I tell people all the time. I think Pebble is the best CRM solution if you want something out of the box. You know, the way I haven't used it, but
Yeah.
I've seen it and I've seen you constantly iterating it. But in
Yeah.
our case, because I have such a complicated business and I'm into tax liens and all this other stuff, we've now created our own CRM. So that way we can
Yeah.
do all the things that I want to do and integrate everything in. So I have a guy that's on staff too, that he's literally putting in 10, 15 hours a week on our CRM
Wow.
to
Wow.
help to manage that and get it to the way I want it to be with everything that we want to do.
Hey, so I hope you're enjoying this episode here so far with Dave Denniston. One of the things he talks about is how he brought on so many team members. In fact, this is what we lean heavily into. When it comes to scaling a business, it's two things: it's technology and human resources. Until robots are ready to take over some of those people, we're not there just yet. And that's why we need things like repeatable processes. That's really what Pebble is all about, that me and the team here are building, helping you find freedom in your own business, helping you to buy back time, helping to scale up your business, whether that means more time with your family or growing the size of your business. We lean heavily on creating repeatable processes, be able to track things between your team members, be able to keep your team members all on the same page with the same source of truth for your data. This makes it so much easier for you to build repeatable processes again and grow the business. If you're interested in learning more to actually build a platform and to actually build a business with structure that you can actually grow, make sure you to head over to pebblerei.com/demo.
So
That is awesome. And thank you for breaking that all down. Now, you've got quite a big team at this point. I mean, A, how long did it take you to get there? And B, what did you do along the way to make it easy to bring? I'm sure you learned a lot bringing on team members and hiring team members. What are some of those lessons you might have gotten along the way, as you sort of hired more and more and probably fired a lot too?
yeah, well, I think one of the things I believe I picked up from LandGeek. So while I have some issues with that group, I do think they did teach some things really well. One of them that I believe came from them was when you hire two or three people at a time. I think
Okay.
that has been really great advice for me. And ideally, when you're starting out and you're hiring people part time, that's much easier to do, right? If you're needing
Hmm.
someone to do a task for 10, 15, 20 hours a week,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to hire two people and compare and
Hmm.
contrast the two. When you're doing full time people, that's a lot more difficult to hire and budget for hiring two
Hmm.
full time people at the same time or three people. And so our process usually is, well, it depends on the job, right? So a lot of our jobs are very detail oriented. When we have someone doing
Hmm.
access scrubbing, for example, we want to know they can follow directions and pick up on a lot of details and do it relatively quickly. So we'll put an ad out there and we'll have inserted within there a word that they have to put in their cover letter, like
Hmm.
boom or land or something like that. And it's buried towards the bottom. So they
Yeah.
have to actually read through it, this long description, to pick up that word, right? It's like, that's a detail oriented person. Um,
Right.
my domestic VAs will do the same thing, particularly intake managers, because it's a very detail oriented kind of position in a lot of
Hmm.
cases with research and understanding what you can and can't do on a property and looking at liens and stuff like that. Those
Hmm.
people I also put through a detail-oriented test, which there's a great website called The Hire Talent, HIRE, HireTalent.com. And they have a whole
The
bunch
hi-
of tests that include
thehighertalent.com.
TheHireTalent.com.
I'll make sure
That
to get that in the
includes
show
sales
notes.
stuff, detail-oriented tests, personality tests. That's been a great resource for me that really allows me to compare and contrast, not only
Mm.
as people come up, but against my best employees, right? And then I was able to develop a baseline to say we have to have someone over this score
Mm.
because these people have been good. These people below this have sucked at this particular job. Most recently, one of my more recent hires, which I forgot to mention, is a gal that's just focusing on texting with texting and calling
Wow.
specifically.
Yeah.
So she's doing that kind of stuff, which that required more sales ability, right? So
Right.
I tested her for sales to see how she did on that and not detail oriented stuff, which they're not going to be as good at. I don't need her to be super detail oriented. Some
Right.
details, sure, but I needed her to be able to sell people on, hey, you need to sell your property to us, and for them to fall
Mm.
in love with her, not because she's great and detail oriented kind of thing. So
Right. Right. Right.
that's some of the things that have helped me along the way. And then it's hard to fire people. I see a lot of us struggling with that. I think a lot of us in the
Hmm.
land business. I love our community. Many of us are really big hearted, and we might see someone who's struggling, and it's
Yeah.
like we don't want to add to their struggles. And
Yeah.
so it can be really, really hard to let someone go when their finances suck. But
Yeah.
at the same point, they're kind of dragging you down.
Yeah.
And so the quicker you can make that decision, the better. And I've had to
Yeah.
do that a few times. Other times, I haven't fired someone quick enough. And
Yeah.
they're like still sticking around. They're like a sore tooth in your mouth that's like, do I really want to pull this tooth? And then it just
Yeah.
gets painful enough to the point that you just have to take it out, right? And
Yeah.
it's
I've
not
got.
pleasant.
I definitely have a little bit of a perspective change when it comes to firing people. A lot of times, you end up keeping them in a role where they're not getting a chance to really, fulfill on what they can actually fulfill. And yeah, it might be painful for them in the short run, but that can lead to some pretty exciting stuff for them down the road too. So sometimes freeing them from your company is going to do them a quick disservice, but an overall a great service for them down the road. So I know the pain of that. Now, I want to ask you a couple things that you mentioned a few times. First of all, very technical question. What is access scrubbing? I'm sure there's a lot of people listening. What the heck is he talking about? All this technical stuff. What is access scrubbing and what are they actually doing?
Yeah. So basically, it's pulling up every single property on MapRight for us. I know they call it Land ID.
Mhm.
It's still MapRight as far as I'm
Yep.
concerned. It's
Yeah.
still MapRight. I'll call it that forever. And so they'll pull up the property on MapRight, and quickly they'll look to see, is there a platted road in there? If there's a
Mhm.
platted road, I'm calling that legal access. Yes, there can be easements to properties. Yes, there can be other things that allow you to get to a property. But generally, most of the time, if something has legal access, there's going to be a platted road showing. Whereas
Mhm.
physical access being, can you actually drive on it, right? You can have a platted road, but it's like overgrown with stuff and you can never actually use the thing. So
Sure.
that's what we are considering for the purpose of access scrubbing, legal versus physical. On MapRight,
Mm.
you can see things like flood zone, you can see things like wetlands. And so we'll categorize a property that have less than 20%
Ah,
wetlands, more than 20% wetlands, or not at all. We also put in there how if it's really close or on a river or lake. And so that
gotcha.
way I could price my mailers more highly for those properties that are on the water, right? So I can be much
Gotcha.
more laser focused on those properties. Also, another common thing that pops up, maybe not for like 30%, but I would say probably 5% of our records is there's still houses on things that are supposed to be just pure land. So if we mailed those out, well, now we are sending mailers to someone that doesn't have raw land. They got a house on the thing.
Right.
So we're
Right.
trying to
Right.
scrub out that kind of stuff. Another common thing being that there are some properties that are crazy skinny. And so we
Mm.
call those not buildable. Like it's literally like a road, right?
Yeah.
Or it's like
A
there's
pencil
like
lot.
a pencil lot, or it's like a barbell, right? Where it's like
Yeah. Right.
you have kind of like two circles over here and a skinny little thing
Yeah.
connecting it. Like that's not buildable. And so and some of this is hard because
Mhm.
some things aren't cut and dry. And so for some things like legal access and physical access, we allow them to choose maybe as an option. Because if it's
Right.
not clear, just say maybe. And so
Mm,
what we'll
mm,
do when we're
mm.
doing blind offers is we'll do like a 50% offer on a maybe, but we remove all of the no's for like legal and physical access. So
Mm.
what that's done for us is like here in Minnesota, for example, there's a lot of lakes and ponds and wetlands, much like Florida is. And there's a lot of properties that are landlocked and that you're never going to get to. So we've downloaded a list of 10,000 from DataTree, but then we might actually just mail out 3,500 or 4,000 of those things. And guess what? We
Mm.
do it one time. We don't have to do it ever again, right? Like it's not like the wetlands is going to change in the next 3 years. It's
Sure.
going to be the same thing for years and years to come. So
Yeah.
we make that investment one time, and now we can come back to the same area and we might be able to change things up. Okay, maybe
Yeah.
we could add in properties without access and we'll give them a 5% of the market offer just to see, if we can do it. So we can
Yeah.
play with those things to be laser like focused and make the best use of our mailing dollars, which for all
Yes.
of us has gotten more and more expensive. So, for
Yes.
example,
Yes.
you've had Alicia Jarrett on, AJ from Supercharged Offers. We're starting to work with her more to supplement what my team is already doing. But
Mm-hmm.
mailing through them, which they offer a lot of wonderful things, it is like 80, 85 cents a mailer with
Yeah.
doing things in color and making
Mm-hmm.
it look beautiful. That's
Mm-hmm.
expensive, right? And so if I can save myself $3,000 on a 10,000 mailer, that more than pays for the $500 or $600 in access scrubbing that I only had to do one time, assuming that we get it right.
Sure. Sure. All right, and so thank you for explaining what access scrubbing was. The other question I've got for you, and I can see you're very entrepreneurial spirited. You like to try a lot of different things, and this is probably why you've got 3 land businesses. I'm assuming, and you're now having fun in this space. And I'd love for you to share a little bit of how others may be able to grow in the land space and try different things. What are your 3 land businesses?
So, long story short, because I know we're running short on time here,
Yeah.
that um, with many, with myself, just as with many people, capital is an issue. And so I started partnering with people on
Mhm.
properties. And it got to the point like I was doing so much volume that I was like, man, how I end up paying the people that are funding stuff far more than what I got paid when you end up looking at the expenses, right? It's like, how
Right.
can I make this more even? And so there were two guys, one being Eric Wong, who's a great friend, and there's a whole amazing story behind our connection, and another gentleman. And I said, how about we just I'll still keep my main land company, but how about we
Mm.
form a land company together? That way you have more insight into all of the finances. You can help essentially pay for the mailers, as
Mhm.
well as the acquisitions. You can help pay for the staff costs, and then we can split the profits 50-50.
Yeah.
And so that turned out to work out great in that time
Amazing.
period.
Yeah.
And Eric, in particular, he's retired from the army, and so he's taking on more of a leadership role in the company now.
Mm.
So it's not as much on my shoulders to help
Yeah.
carry everything,
Yeah.
because I've been CEO and CFO and multiple roles in that company, and it's just not worth my time at this point to
Sure.
have to do all of those things. And so he's really stepped up to the plate and helped to carry the load. And so that's why at the end of the day, it was just like, how can I make more money with all this work and make it more equitable? And so that's
Yeah.
that's why we did it. And basically, I was recreating what I had already created, just in
Mm.
different areas. So we focus more on the West Coast
Yeah.
with the company with Eric, Family Freedom Lands. The other company,
Mm.
Southern Family Lands, we focus more at like Florida because
Mm.
Florida is such a big market. And then Generation Family Properties, my main company, has been more kind of middle of the country,
Got it.
Colorado, New Mexico. I've done a lot of Arizona. I've done a lot of Oregon. Done a lot
Yeah.
more recently here in the Missouri and Minnesota and Wisconsin and getting into Michigan too. So that's kind of how I've divided it up.
Got you.
And to have the company so that they weren't competing, but doing
Right. Right.
different things.
All right. I know we're running out of time here, Dave. I feel like I could just continue listening on here. You probably have things to do, but I want to leave you with a couple questions here really quick. I sort of call this the quick fire round. Outside of land, what do you like doing?
I love, particularly this time of the year in the summer in Minnesota. I love to go on bike rides. I love to go for
Nice.
walks. I go for walk and runs this time of the year. I'm a bit of a nerd. I have a game called Conflict of Nations. I like to play
Oh.
on my phone, which is like Risk on steroids. So if you love Risk, you'd love Conflict of Nations. It's
There
awesome.
you go.
Certainly going on dates with my wife. We love going to movies. I love to
Yeah.
travel, so I put together a event or different events now called the Land Unconference,
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that.
it's now we're kind of expanding it. So I've been doing it annually for quite a while after I left kind of the Land Geek folks,
Yeah.
and we're full for all of our upcoming events, which is like a whole year out, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That is
we're
awesome.
with Seth Williams and Callan Faulkner, who
Yeah.
are two
Yeah.
amazing people. We
Yeah.
have one here in Minneapolis coming up in a month, which there's just going to be 20 of us in the room, and everyone's going to do the masterminds and get individual coaching from Seth,
That's
Callan,
awesome.
and myself.
Wow.
I'm not like a guru selling a course. Like those guys are doing amazing things, and I feel like
Sure.
I'm just lucky to come along for the ride. And then in January, one of your last podcast guests with Drew Haney and Jaron Barnes, we're taking a group of 7 other guys plus us to Puerto Rico. And we're
Yeah.
going to be a whole week there, which is going to be amazing. So it'll be like the Korea trip that you did on steroids
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
with those guys. And then in May of 2024, we're going back here to Minneapolis and having a 50, actually 60 person big unconference mastermind event. And I'm probably going to be doing more stuff in the future. So
Yeah.
I'm talking with Seth about doing a really cool international trip because I have this huge bucket list of all these places I really want to go
That's
to,
awesome.
like
Yeah.
Japan and Thailand and Italy and Israel and Scotland and so many places in the world to see and go. And what a great excuse to get
Yes.
the
Right.
people together for something I'm so passionate about. Maybe make a little bit of money, but money isn't
Yeah.
the goal. It's more,
Sure.
hey, you're helping to pay for my trip, and you get a huge ROI from building relationships with all these amazing, like minded people that are paying thousands of dollars to be at this event. And me too, I'm naturally more introverted. And so
Yeah.
getting in a smaller group, for me personally, I just
Mm.
enjoy it so much because I can build relationships with
Yes.
people in
Yeah.
a intense environment for a few days, and you become lifelong known friends.
Sure.
Maybe some of us
Yeah.
are closer than others, but hey, if I have a
Yeah.
question, I know I can talk to this person and that person because we broke bread together.
Yeah.
Literally in some of these
Mhm.
masterminds, I've had people cry because
Yeah.
they were going through something so intense. Those moments, it's like going to war with people.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
really get something that you can't get on a Zoom call when
Yeah.
we're spending an hour together or 30 minutes together. And so if people
Yeah.
ever want to check it out, you could apply at landunconference.com for that kind of stuff. If you want to go hang out with me and Seth and maybe Callan out all around the world, we're going to do it.
I'll make sure to include that in my show notes. It's you're answering a lot of my questions I have had here to see how people can interact with you. Dave, thank you so much for coming on this show and sharing, your journey, the things you've done with your team, the growth you've had, the things you've tried, and the things that you are continuing to try. It's just so exciting to see people explore within this I mean, I think land is still relatively quite new, and there's just so much fun you can have in this space, and I certainly can see that in the way you talk about it and in your eyes about it. So I hope you continue to do what you do. Certainly, Dave, I'd love to continue to chat with you behind the scenes here, but Dave, thank you so much for coming on the show here.
Love it. Thank you, Jesse. And I just want to say thank you to you too. I think people don't realize doing content creation like you're doing right here, like literally you don't get paid for it. And you do it because you like connecting with people. And I feel very
Yeah.
fortunate in my life and some of the connection I've been able to make because of podcasting, but like literally you get paid nothing for it. And you add a lot of value to people. And I've been listening to the podcast for a long time. So thank you. Thank
I
you for
appreciate it.
putting me
Hey,
here.
I always say I don't know who listens to this darn thing, but if you do, thank you so much. But once again, it's guests like you that make this show. So, Dave, once again, thank you so much. I'm going to make sure I include some of those links and how people can reach out to you. It'll be on the show's website. Cheers, Dave.
Great. Thanks, Jesse.
Before you stop this episode or hit the next episode, I want to personally thank you for listening to this episode of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast by Pebble. If you found this helpful, we'd greatly appreciate any awesome reviews and ratings on whichever platform you are listening to this on. And if you have 2 minutes and wanted to step it up even more and help others, feel free to share this in other Facebook groups or pages or any communities, giving others a heads up of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast or the specific episode that may help them on their land investing journey. Once again, thanks so much for listening, and catch you on our next episode.